And according to the United Nations, more than 2 million Syrians have now fled their war-ravaged country. That's an average of 5,000 men, women, and children who are pouring across the border every day. This massive flow is putting pressure on Syria's neighbors and further threatening stability in the region. For more on this, we're joined by our UN correspondent Stephen Fee in New York. And Stephen, what can you tell us?
Well, Elaine, it is a tragic benchmark, and it underscores the rapidly deteriorating situation in Syria. In addition to those 2 million people outside of the country, there are 4 million internally displaced people within Syria's borders. Now, meanwhile, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon updated reporters on the ongoing chemical weapons investigation in Syria, and he said he would press world leaders on the worsening situation there at the G20 summit later this week in Russia.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
The Secretary General says the conflict in Syria should serve as a wake-up call for the international community and the Security Council.
The Security Council has a duty to move beyond the current stalemate and show leadership. This is a larger issue than the conflict in Syria. This is about our collective responsibility to humankind.
With the UN's most powerful body deadlocked, the Secretary General said he understands why certain countries may want to respond to the alleged use of chemical weapons. But he warns,
we must consider the impact of any punitive measure on efforts to prevent the further bloodshed and facilitate the political resolution of the conflict.
What's more, UN officials say that conflict has reached a sad milestone. 2 million Syrians have now fled to neighboring countries, half of them in the last 6 months.
These are indeed 2 million of individual stories. 2 million people that many have lost their houses, members of their families, their possessions, many children that are now dramatically traumatized by violence.
In Geneva, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees warns the outflow of Syrians is putting immense pressure on neighboring nations.
The risks for global peace and security that the present Syria crisis represents, I'm sure, are not smaller than what we have witnessed in any other of the crises we had since at least the Vietnam War.
Lebanon has taken on the most Syrian refugees since the civil war began. More than 700,000 people have registered there, but the real number is likely much higher.
And Elaine, it turns out, according to the UN, that half of those 2 million refugees are children. And as for that 2 million figure itself, it's likely an undercount. Many refugees don't register once they cross the border. The UN says unless drastic action is taken, the number of refugees could hit 3 million by the year's end.
Well, and Stephen, did the Secretary General have any more to add on the chemical weapons investigation and when the UN inspectors might publish their report?
Well, the Secretary General again today said there is no timeline. He did, however, say that inspectors have been working around the clock and that all of their biomedical and environmental evidence would be in laboratories by Wednesday. He's also been updating members of the UN. He briefed the 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council today, while his chief disarmament official, Angela Kane, spoke to other UN members as well.
And Stephen, a reporter did ask Secretary Ban if a U.S. strike would be a violation of international law. How did he respond to that?
Well, he responded very diplomatically. He said he appreciated President Obama's call for congressional authorization, but he still said that authorization of force should not be taken unless it's in self-defense or with authorization of the Security Council. He said that was a firm UN principle, but he seemed ready to leave the rest of the legal reasoning for another day. Elaine?
All right, Stephen Fee live in New York. Thanks.